built on ideas, not any shared ethnicity. You know, JFK's posthumous book, A Nation of Immigrants, made that term all the more popular. He critiqued restrictive immigration policies, arguing immigration is not a burden to this country. It's a chance to shape a pluralistic new world.
We are the descendants of 40 million people who left other countries, other familiar scenes, to come here to the United States to build a new life, to make a new opportunity for themselves and their children. I think it is not a burden, but a privilege to have the chance in 1963 to share that great concept which they felt so deeply among all of our people. To make this really, as it was for them, a new world for us, and indeed for all those who look to us.
Kennedy was serious about broadening our immigration laws, although like so much of the slain president's agenda, it was LBJ who ultimately passed the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965.
This bill says simply that from this day forth, those wishing to immigrate to America shall be admitted on the basis of their skills and their close relationships to those already here. This is a simple test, and it is a fair test. Those who can contribute most to this country, to its growth, to its strength, to its spirit, will be the first that are admitted to this land.
That law pulled America away from its past nativism, using fewer quotas for countries or categories related to race and religion. It focused more on people's skills and their potential contributions to America. It's also the same law the Trump administration has invoked for a power to ban entire groups of immigrants based on their home country, a position that yielded a mixed decision at the Supreme Court this week. They blocked part of the travel ban, allowed other parts to be enforced. And so now that part of it has been enforced for about 3 days. In a sense, these are the first 3 days that a version of Trump's immigration vision has been implemented with a blessing from the highest court in the land. And that makes it, critics say, a step towards the nativism that Trump tapped into or revived at his rallies. And the Trump immigration agenda doesn't stop there. You may have missed this news with all the drama over Trump's media feuds, but here's a more important development. This week, the House passed 2 tough immigration rules, one to crack down on sanctuary cities, another stiffening penalties for undocumented immigrants who are convicted of crimes and attempt to re-enter the nation. That second bill, you may have heard, is called Kate's Law. It's named for a California woman who was murdered by an undocumented immigrant. Trump says this is a simple step for a simple problem.
This legislation presents a simple choice. Either vote to save and protect American lives, or vote to shield and comfort criminal aliens who threaten innocent lives. And they've been shielded too long.
Now, that bill passed by an almost 100-vote margin in the House, including 24 Democrats. A lot of people across the political spectrum like the idea of getting tough on crimes committed by people who aren't lawfully authorized to be here in the first place. That may make some sense to a lot of people. The president said it's simple. Turns out the issues are a lot more complex, though. Here's the Libertarian Cato Institute, for example. They did an analysis, and they state that Kate's Law is a waste of federal resources. It would balloon America's population of nonviolent prisoners while not protecting Americans against serious criminals. Their report states the motivation for Kate's Law rests on the belief that illegal immigrants are more likely to commit serious crimes and so should be singled out. Yet studies show illegal immigrants are less likely to end up behind bars than U.S.-born citizens. Joining me now is Karthik Ramakrishnan, an immigration scholar and associate dean of public policy at University of California, Aaron McPike, chief White House correspondent for the Independent Journal Review, and Mark Thompson, back with us from Sirius Radio. Karthik, your view.
Well, I think that Cato Institute report laid it out best. This is not a big problem in the United States. It might make for a lot of emotions and symbolism, but most immigrants in the U.S., the vast majority of them, are contributing to our economy and to our society. And to go after something that is not a big issue in the larger scheme of things is a distraction. But I can see why it makes for good politics. It doesn't make for good public policy.
Let me read, Aaron, from Justin Amash, who is another conservative Republican, because some of the debate on this has been interesting. He says, I voted no on Kate's Law. My concern with the bill stems from a provision that denies Fifth Amendment due process to certain criminal defendants. Again, the idea that getting tough sounds good. When you get into details, he says it's just not fair the way they do it.
Yeah, Ariane, I think one of the arguments that you're hearing is that that particular piece of legislation is written in such an overbroad way, and that's why it's gotten so complicated. You did point out that there are some Democrats who supported it, but I think one of the things that we're finding is, especially when it comes to immigration, if the Trump administration and Republicans who support the Trump administration come together to write the laws, be they executive orders or legislation, in a more narrowly focused way, they might have some more success.
Right, and it seems that, Mark, there's a great interest in finding any angle the White House can here. This is a place where they've made action. Other things are stalled in the House. Jeff Sessions, as for the travel ban, took a victory lap. What everyone thinks of the travel ban, he made a fair point, which is this has been covered as if it was totally unconstitutional, illegal, and wild. And in fact, that has yet to be determined, which is a legal fact. Here's Jeff Sessions.
The court rejected this whole narrative of the left that his orders, the president's orders, were wrong and unjustified and unconstitutional. So I think it was a great victory for the president.
Mark?
The Attorney General, who's had to hire his own attorney, by the way. The Supreme Court is a little baffling to me. You had two, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, two courts of appeals that said this could not go forward. I'm not sure what the Supreme Court saw on the merits to make it go forward, rather than just say, all right, we'll grant cert, we'll hear it in the fall. It's troubling because it doesn't make any sense. Grandmothers aren't allowed, but mothers-in-law and step siblings are allowed. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It allows the Trump administration to be somewhat random in that regard. This plus the Cates Law further defines immigrants as inherently criminal. And I think that's part of the problem.
You're saying that the notion that because they're coming from somewhere, they're more suspect, rather than any security analysis of who they are.
Right, no, absolutely. And as your graphics just showed, I mean, people tend to commit crime where they are. So they're less likely to commit these crimes. And of course, the crime that was committed against the young lady was a tragic crime. But in a country where there's a great proliferation of guns, where you still have the NRA putting out an ad just the other day almost encouraging a civil war, anybody can be shot or gunned down in America, whether it's an immigrant or not. It's not likely that it's going to be an immigrant more so than it's going to be an American. Again, this is appealing to the base. This is ginning up that base. They know 2018 is around the corner, so they're playing to that nativist base that Steve Bannon helped to curate.
Right. Well, Karthik, why don't you speak to some of the points Mark raises in terms of how this actually applies. We'll just, for viewers, give a very simple overview. Under the new Supreme Court ruling, it's basically potential migrants from the 6 countries under the ban will be subject to the ban, meaning for the 90-day period they're not allowed in, refugees from the entire world, and so about half will be blocked. The grandmother bona fide family connection issue is that some people from those countries, those 6 countries you see there, would still get in if they had a prior visa or had a link to the U.S. that allowed them to challenge the ban.
Yes, as far as we can tell, the Supreme Court has not, contrary to what the Attorney General claimed, has not ruled on the constitutionality of this. It may be tipping its hand, but I think it's too early to tell. What we know is that what the president had said during the campaign trail and even after he got elected, essentially that this would be a way to restrict Muslim immigrants from coming into the United States, that is relevant to the consideration. There's also the issue of whether...
You're saying the lower, let's be clear though, the lower court said that was relevant. The Supreme Court didn't touch it yet.
It hasn't touched it yet. Exactly. So this could very well come back again in the fall when the court hears it. There's also the question of whether this kind of a national origin, if it's not a ban, at least a temporary suspension, has a rational basis. And it's still, the court has not ruled on that.
Right.
There are countries that are not included in this. If you look at the shooting in San Bernardino, for example, that involved an immigrant from Pakistan that is not on the list. So I think we will start to get scrutiny in terms of what was the rational basis behind targeting these specific countries, right, even if there's a national security rationale. And then,
Aaron, on the politics of this, what about the Trump White House argument that when they get a bad ruling, it's a huge deal politically and in the press, and when they get a mixed or medium good ruling, I think you could call this, I mean, you really don't want any of your presidential actions stayed, and the Supreme Court still blocked part of it. So it's not the best thing in the world, but it's better than what they had under the 4th and 9th Circuit. The Trump White House officials tell us, well, why isn't that as big a story? They feel very frustrated with that.
Yeah, because as you mentioned, it's not a full-throated win, but I would say that I think President Trump portrayed it as such, as a huge win himself, but he obviously stomped all over the kind of win that he could have had by other actions that he made this week. You know, I think they're right.
Aaron, are you suggesting that although the White House has complained about the media coverage, the president has contributed to a lack of proportionate topics being covered?
Yeah, you know, I also think we've talked at length too in the last couple of days about how White House staff themselves are upset at the president for contributing to what he has so far recently.
As they say in Washington, tweet, tweet, who's got the keys to my Jeep? Can't control the news cycle if you can't control your own Twitter fingers. It's a bigger, it's a bigger problem, but I think we hopefully have covered some ground on what really did happen on immigration this week. Karthik, Mark, and Aaron, I appreciate all you being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Up next in our Normal or Not report, Yemen is one of the countries just mentioned on that track.